Welcome, everyone. This is Liz Colway, Senior Manager of Community Building and Digital Engagement at the Sabin Vaccine Institute. I have been supporting the Boost community, a growing network of more than 1,700 immunization professionals from around the world, since its launch in January 2020. During that timeframe, we kicked off a storytelling initiative called Bright Spots, an effort to shine a light on voices of innovation and adaptability in the immunization sector. Bright Spots highlights grassroots-driven process improvement in routine immunization service delivery at the subnational level. The Bright Spots initiative serves as a means to continuously share, learn, and discuss innovation, provide immunization staff with an opportunity to showcase their innovations, and work together to discover new ways of doing things. The inaugural call for stories focused on partnership for impact, diving into the importance of stakeholder engagement and strategic operations for immunization programming. This year, Boost pivoted its focus, reflecting on the immense global changes that have resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic, and as a result, issued a call for stories that demonstrate resourcefulness, adaptability, and resilience. Through rounds of interviews and back-and-forth emails, the team at Pauqua have worked very closely with story submitters to hone their respective narratives. The result has been more than just compelling stories displayed on a website. In fact, the process has been transformative for those telling their stories and for our members who are listening in and asking questions. Today, we hope to share a little more about that evolution. With that, let's go ahead and jump in. Moihaki, could you please introduce yourself? We're interested in who you are, where you're from, and how you got into storytelling.
My name is Moihaki Muraguri, and I'm based in my hometown of Nairobi, Kenya. I'm an individual who has always loved the power of stories and their ability to take me to new places, to influence new ideas, to open up new worlds, and really just try and see life from a very different perspective, but also a very human perspective. And that's something that I've really always loved from the time that I was a child. But my work as a professional storyteller and writer is relatively recent. I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years now, and I really enjoy it. But my previous season of life was working in public health and development practice, which I did for about 20 years, working all over sub-Saharan Africa, working with individuals and institutions in everything from HIV delivery and care to enabling communities to think about lessons in public health and sanitation. So this really is a new chapter for me, and I'm really enjoying it because with a lot of the work that I do, I'm able to bring my previous life as somebody who's very committed to the idea of social change into my new life, which is about translating those ideas and that work that happens out in the field and out in the trenches to people in a way that is appreciated, understood, that is aware of the context and the challenges and the nuances that different individuals have to work in.
For the past couple years, you have worked closely with Boost community members to craft their stories. Can you share a bit more about what this process entails?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I'm very familiar with some of the challenges, a lot of the challenges actually, that a lot of public health practitioners find in the field, whether it's working with constrained resources, worried that your work won't have funding in 6 months' time, yet knowing that there's still such immense need for the work that you're doing. And I find myself in this new and interesting position as both a translator and a loudspeaker. And I say translator because I know that in this profession, there's a lot of defaulting and shortcutting in terms of our language. And we find ourselves using a lot of jargon, explaining things in technical terms, assuming that people will easily understand what we're trying to communicate. But at the same time, I think that I'm also in the position of a loudspeaker because my team and I get to turn the story of what is happening in one corner of the world and amplify that to a lot of other people who are working either in similar circumstances or trying to achieve similar things. And so we find ourselves in that dual role. And what happens is that when we receive the applications that are sent in by the people who are submitting a story for a bright spot, we have to understand both the challenge of the context that they're working in, and therefore we look for how immunization is happening there. So things like are the vaccination teams working in an area which is urban or rural? And if it's urban, is it in high rises or is it in leafy suburbs or is it in informal settlements? Because these are very different contexts. If it's rural, the vaccinators having to travel by motorbike because of the terrain? Is it that they have to access these communities by boat because a lot of the areas are only navigable and reachable through rivers? So what we are trying to do is understand and unlock the challenges that the Bright Spots submitters have in terms of reaching the populations. And when I talk about populations also, we are trying to understand, is it a pastoralist population? Or is this a population that is tightly knit? So all of these little nuances are things that we're really trying to draw out, because while the technical elements of the story are very clear, right? So if it's microplanning, it is microplanning. If it's challenging hesitancy, that is very clear. But as the storytelling team, what we want to know is what is different about your location. And these nuances help us to start building a mental picture of what vaccine delivery means in different locations. And that's where we can really start building the story. From there, we're able now to schedule an interview with the story submitters and hear in their own words what some of these nuances are. And it's really enjoyable for us to have these interviews, because then we can really pull at the threads of walk us through what your day actually looks like. Yes, because our work is to then build that picture in the story that will eventually go up on the Boost community site. We then send a copy of the draft that we've worked on and agreed on back to the story submitters, and then they have an opportunity to figure out, does this actually represent my work? Is this factually correct? Is the center of the story the main message that I wanted to pass back? And through a couple of iterations back and forth, we're then able to come up with a final version of the story, which will then go up on the site.
In your opinion, what are some of the most critical pieces to storytelling?
What I have found is that a lot of our story submitters are usually very shy individuals, and they're very hesitant to put themselves at the center of the story. And it's only sometimes when we're having an interview and we have multiple people on the interview and, people say, but no, remember when you did that and remember what you were able to accomplish. I would encourage people to really talk about the story and the events as they unfolded from their personal perspective. Because when we're talking about success in a report format, it's very much about the numbers, the indicators. But when it comes to storytelling, we really want to hear about what it felt like for the individuals who were in the trenches. And so we want to be able to name them, give them a name, a persona, be able to understand their frustrations and the way that they were able to overcome certain barriers, and how they were eventually able to triumph in their work. So don't be afraid to tell the story from your perspective, and be able to tell the story with you, the human, at the center of it.
What are a few tips that you would share with individuals who are interested in honing their storytelling skills and elevating their story as a bright spot?
From my perspective, it really is about the human in the story. Much as we might be telling stories and activities that are happening in very, very different and diverse and distinct places, at the end of the day, we are all people. And we're all people who are trying to make a change in our communities. And so trying to bring out that human who is at the center of the story is a very critical piece of storytelling. The other thing is that assume that you are talking to strangers, people who are human, but who know nothing about the environment in which you work. So you want to focus on things that, if I'm talking about Northern Nigeria, tell me about the context, tell me about the challenges, tell me about the hurdles that one has to overcome. I remember we were writing a story about some vaccinators in Nepal, and literally their work base was at the base of the Himalaya. And one of the things that we had to do was really just animate this context of working in this mountainous region and providing the context of this vaccinator having to walk not just kilometers to get to their population, but up steep mountains to actually do that. We had the opportunity to share another story about a team that works in the DRC, and they had to reach their populations by boat, which was very unique. And one of the things that we had to think about is, so when I'm planning to go by boat, if I've never been on a boat, how do I want to explain this to the people who are reading so that they understand the challenges of, you have to go when it's not the rainy season. We want to hear and see the human elements of the story, as mentioned. So we know that this is tiring work. It can be frustrating. It can be lonely. It can demand a lot from individuals. But at the same time, when the win happens, the win overcomes all of that. And so we want to be able to share that elation, to share what it felt to have that breakthrough when, you finally got a stamp of approval from the government, or you were able to increase vaccination uptake from 60% to 89%. That's a huge win. What did it actually feel like to get to that win? So for me, I always say, where's the human in the story? And assume I know nothing about the context that you're working in. So explain everything.
Why is it important for immunization professionals to apply for Bright Spots and use storytelling to promote their projects and programs?
That's an interesting question, and I would like to answer it like this. The amount of resources that we have for achieving excellence and progress and change are very limited. And especially for people who are working in those environments where resources are very constrained, right? So you're working with small budgets, you're working with tight timelines. If somebody else has already figured out how to overcome a certain barrier, if somebody has already figured out how to navigate through, how to use new technology to accelerate their work, wouldn't you want to learn from them? And so my question is, if you are that individual, if you have just gotten through a time when instead of being able to do a mass vaccination drive of 1,000 people, you managed to reach 2,000 people, isn't that a story that you should be sharing? I would say that yes, that's a story that needs to be heard, because there's thousands of individuals across the globe who are trying to deal with and overcome the same sort of challenges that you are overcoming in your work. So share the good news, essentially, and allow us at Boost to help amplify, to help translate, and to help bring that loudspeaker to the work that you're doing so that others facing the same sort of challenges may be able to get to their destination a little quicker. Thank you so much for this time. I've really enjoyed sharing these insights to the Boost community, and I really look forward to seeing hundreds of more stories that we can all share and learn from.
We understand that the immunization landscape will continue to change as we all, together, discover our new normal and endeavor to build back better. The next call for Bright Spots will focus on key lessons learned from implementing immunization programs during the COVID-19 pandemic and how our community has returned or is returning to routine immunization.